The last Zephyrian stronghold shook as another wave of metal creatures slammed against the energy shields. Ambassador Cathara pressed her six-fingered hands against the command center's viewing window and watched her world die. Below the floating city, the planet's surface looked like a graveyard. Where green forest once grew, only gray metal remained. The Devourers had eaten everything. Trees, rocks, even the soil itself had been consumed and turned into more of the mechanical monsters that now surrounded their final refuge. "How long do we have?" she asked the defense commander. 6 hours, maybe 7 if we shut down life support to the lower levels, he replied. His voice carried no hope. They both knew what that meant. 30,000 civilians lived in those lower levels. Families with children who had already lost their homes, their planets, their entire civilization. Cathara closed her eyes and tried not to think about the 12 worlds that had fallen before this one. Each planet had held billions of her people. Scientists, artists, farmers, teachers. All gone now. All turned into fuel for the endless metal swarm that ate worlds for breakfast. The Devourers had appeared 3 years ago in the outer systems. At first, the Zephyrian military thought they could fight them. Their ships were fast and their weapons were strong. They had fought pirates and rebels for centuries. How hard could it be to stop some machines? They learned the hard way. The Devourers did not just destroy. They learned. Every weapon fired at them made them stronger. Every tactic used against them was copied and improved. When the Zephyrian fleet hit them with plasma cannons, the Devourers built better plasma cannons. When the military tried sneak attacks, the Devourers started predicting where they would strike next. World after world fell. The proud Zephyrian civilization, which had ruled 12 star systems for over 1,000 years, was being eaten alive by an enemy that grew stronger with every battle. "Ambassador," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving responses to our distress calls." Cathara's heart jumped. Maybe one of the other great civilizations had finally decided to help. The Altarians had powerful ships. The Nexus Collective had weapons that could crack moons. Even the war-loving Krethari might see the Devourers as a worthy challenge. "Who is responding?" she asked, rushing to the communication station. The officer looked confused. "Only one species has sent a reply, Ambassador." "The humans." Cathara felt her hope die. The humans. Of all the species in the galaxy, the humans were perhaps the least capable of helping anyone. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their technology was primitive. Their ships were small and weak. Most other civilizations barely considered them worth talking to. "What do they say?" she asked anyway. At this point, even a gesture of sympathy would mean something. The officer played the message. A simple text transmission in basic galactic standard. Coordinates received. "Help is coming. Hold position." Several officers in the command center laughed. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes when stress and fear mix with something so absurd it might as well be funny. The humans thought they could help. The species that had not even left their own solar system until recently thought they could fight an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. "Should we respond?" the communications officer asked. Cathara stared at the message. "Help is coming." 3 words that should have filled her with hope, but instead made her feel even more alone. The humans probably meant well. They were known to be kind to other species, even if they were not very powerful. But what could they possibly do against the Devourers? Another explosion rocked the floating city. The shields flickered for a moment before stabilizing. 6 hours was looking optimistic now. "Ambassador," the defense commander said quietly, "perhaps we should consider evacuation. If we load the civilian transports now, some of our people might escape before the shields fail." Cathara knew he was right. But escape to where? The Devourers had consumed every world in their territory. The nearest safe system was controlled by the Altarians, who had already refused to accept Zephyrian refugees. They were afraid the Devourers would follow. She looked around the command center at the faces of her people, young officers who had joined the military, thinking they would explore new worlds and keep the peace. Veterans who had fought pirates and terrorists but never faced anything like this. All of them looking at her, waiting for orders, hoping she had some plan that could save them. The truth was, she had nothing. No plan, no hope, no miracle weapon hidden away for emergencies. Just 30,000 civilians and a few hundred soldiers facing an enemy that had already proven unstoppable. "Send a reply to the humans," she said finally. "Tell them our exact situation. How many devourers we are facing, how long our shields will last, tell them everything. Ambassador, the communications officer said carefully. They will see how hopeless our situation is. They will realize there is nothing they can do to help. Then at least someone will know what happened here, Cathara replied. At least someone will remember that we tried to fight them. The message went out across space, carrying the full tactical situation to human space. 12 million devourer units surrounding their position, shields failing, no backup coming, no escape route available. A complete tactical analysis of how the greatest military force in their sector had been systematically destroyed by an enemy that learned from every defeat. In her private quarters that night, Cathara recorded her final message. She spoke about her people's history, their art, their dreams of exploring distant stars. She talked about the children in the lower levels who would never grow up to become scientists or artists or explorers. She recorded the names of the 12 worlds that had fallen, so that someone somewhere would remember they had existed. When she finished, she sent the recording to every known civilization in the galaxy. Maybe the humans would pass it along. Maybe someone would learn from their mistakes and find a way to stop the devourers before they consumed the entire galaxy. Outside her window, the mechanical swarm pressed closer. Metal shapes the size of buildings crawled over each other, building towers and weapons platforms that reached toward their failing shields. The devourers had all the time in the universe. They could wait. But as she prepared for what would likely be her final sleep, Cathara found herself thinking about the human message. Help is coming. Such confidence in those 3 words, such certainty. As if the humans knew something she did not. She almost smiled at the thought. What could the humans possibly know about fighting an enemy like this? They had never even fought a real war in space. Their largest ships were smaller than Zephyrian patrol boats. Their weapons were basic projectile systems and simple energy beams. Still, something about their message nagged at her. Not what they said, but how they said it. No questions about the tactical situation. No requests for more information. No expressions of sympathy or promises to try their best. Just 3 words delivered with the kind of calm confidence usually reserved for routine communications. Help is coming, as if they had been expecting this call all along. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the UES Indomitable, reading the Zephyrian tactical report for the 3rd time. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for a jump that would take them further from Earth than any human ship had ever traveled. 12 million hostile units, she said aloud, not really talking to anyone in particular. Adaptive learning technology. 43 civilizations consumed in the past 50 years. Captain Martinez, her second in command, walked over with a cup of coffee. Second thoughts, Admiral? Sarah took the coffee and shook her head. Just making sure I understand what we're walking into. Has the fleet finished loading supplies? All 37 ships report ready for departure. The Senate is still arguing about whether this mission is legal under the Colonial Defense Act. Sarah laughed. Since when do politicians understand military necessity? We have our orders from the Joint Chiefs. That's enough for me. She moved to the main display screen, which showed a 3-dimensional map of local space. Earth sat at the center, surrounded by the dozen colony worlds that humanity had established over the past 50 years. Beyond that, empty space stretched for light years before reaching the edges of alien territory. Most of the other species had been surprised when humans finally achieved faster-than-light travel. They had been monitoring Earth's radio signals for decades, watching humanity's slow progress from a planet-bound species to one that could barely reach its own moon. The general consensus among galactic civilizations was that humans were harmless, friendly enough but not particularly advanced or dangerous. That misconception had served humanity well. Admiral, the communications officer called out, we're receiving another message from the Zephyrians. They're asking for our estimated time of arrival and want to know how many ships we're bringing. Tell them we'll be there in 18 hours, Sarah replied. As for ship numbers, let them count when we arrive. She did not mention that the 37 ships jumping towards Zephyrian space were not the kind of vessels that alien observers had seen during humanity's first contact missions. Those had been exploration ships and diplomatic vessels, designed to look impressive but harmless. The ships preparing to jump were from a different fleet entirely. The Terran Defense Fleet had been built in secret over the past 30 years. While humanity's public shipyards produced cargo vessels and colony ships, Hidden facilities in the asteroid belt and outer planet moons had been constructing something else entirely. Warships designed not for exploration or trade, but for the kind of warfare that had consumed the galaxy for centuries. "Ma'am," Captain Martinez said quietly. "Some of the junior officers are nervous. They've been reading the reports about what the Devourers did to the Altarian Third Fleet. It wasn't pretty." Sarah nodded. The Altarians had been one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Their ships were fast and their weapons could punch through the armor of small moons. The Devourers had destroyed them in less than 6 hours, learning their tactics and turning their own weapons against them. "Tell the junior officers that the Altarians made the same mistake everyone else has made," she said. "They fought the Devourers like they were fighting other civilized species. Orderly formations, conventional tactics, predictable weapon systems. And we're different how?" Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Because we've been studying the Devourers for 3 years. We know how they learn, how they adapt, how they think. Most importantly, we know how to kill them." The truth was something that very few people in the galaxy understood. While other civilizations had been trying to ignore the Devourer threat, hoping it would not reach their territory, humanity had been preparing. Earth's deep space monitoring stations had been tracking every battle, analyzing every engagement, building detailed models of how the mechanical swarm operated. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, Earth's leading expert on artificial intelligence, had spent 2 years studying captured Devourer technology. What she had discovered was both terrifying and useful. The Devourers were incredibly advanced, but they had a weakness. They were too smart for their own good. "Admiral," the navigation officer announced, "all ships report ready for jump. Course laid in for the Kepler 442 system." Sarah moved to her command chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the Admiral. In a few minutes we will be jumping to engage an enemy that has destroyed 43 civilizations. I know some of you are wondering if we can win this fight." She paused, looking around the bridge at faces both young and experienced. These people had trained their entire lives for this moment, even if they had not known it. "I want you to remember something," she continued. "Every species the Devourers have faced has tried to fight them the same way. Stand-up battles, ship against ship, conventional weapons and traditional tactics. Every single one of those species lost because they fought the kind of war they understood." The bridge was completely silent now. "We are not going to fight that kind of war. We are going to fight the kind of war that humans have always been good at. The kind of war that made our ancestors the apex predators on Earth. We are going to hunt them." Sarah ended the transmission and settled into her chair. Around her, the bridge crew began the final preparations for jump. She could feel the tension in the air, but it was good tension, the kind that came before a difficult task that needed to be done. "Admiral," Captain Martinez said, "the Zephyrians are asking if we want to coordinate our attack with their remaining forces." "Tell them to keep their heads down and stay out of our way," Sarah replied. "This won't take long." The jump engines powered up with a low humming sound that vibrated through the ship's hull. Sarah thought about Ambassador Keithera and the 30,000 civilians waiting for help that they probably thought would never come. She thought about the 12 worlds that had already fallen and the billions of people who had died because no one had been prepared to fight an enemy like the Devourers. That was about to change. "All ships report ready." "Admiral," the navigation officer announced. "Execute jump," Sarah ordered. Space twisted around them as 37 human warships disappeared from the solar system, carrying weapons and tactics that no other species had ever seen. Behind them, Earth continued its quiet rotation, looking as peaceful and harmless as it had for billions of years. But the galaxy was about to learn that appearances could be very deceiving. 18 hours later, the human fleet would arrive at Kepler 442 to find 12 million Devourer units preparing for what they expected to be an easy victory over the last Zephyrian stronghold. The mechanical swarm had calculated every possible outcome based on their previous encounters with organic civilizations. They had not calculated for humans. That was their first mistake. It would also be their last. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, like ghosts materializing from the void. 37 ships spread out in a formation that looked random to anyone watching, but followed patterns that had been practiced thousands of times in secret. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical display that showed the situation they had come to fix. The Zephyrian city ship hung in space above the dead planet, its shields flickering under constant assault from the mechanical swarm surrounding it. 12 million Devourer units moved in perfect coordination, building weapon platforms and siege engines that would soon break through the last barrier protecting 30,000 innocent lives. Analysis. Commander Hayes, Sarah said to the woman standing beside her. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes had joined the fleet specifically for this mission. She knew more about Devourer technology than anyone else in human space. For 3 years, she had studied every piece of data they could gather about the mechanical swarm, building detailed models of how they thought and fought. They're following standard siege protocols, Hayes said, pointing to different sections of the display, building redundant weapon platforms, establishing overlapping fields of fire, preparing for multiple breakthrough attempts. Very efficient, very thorough. Weaknesses? They're thinking like an army, Hayes replied. Everything coordinated, everything planned, everything working together toward a single goal. They expect us to do the same thing, Sarah nodded. That was exactly what she had hoped to hear. The Devourers had spent 50 years fighting civilized species that followed military doctrine and fought organized battles. They had learned to counter every conventional tactic, every standard strategy, every predictable approach to warfare. Humans were not going to fight a conventional battle. Signal the fleet, Sarah ordered. Begin Hunter Protocol. All ships are weapons-free. Ignore formation discipline. Each ship picks its own targets and engagement pattern. Around the system, 37 human warships suddenly scattered like a pack of wolves approaching prey. They did not maintain neat formations or coordinate their movements. Instead, each ship began moving independently, following tactics that had been developed not in military academies, but in Earth's most dangerous places. The UES Predator, under Captain Jackson, moved like its namesake. Instead of approaching the Devourer swarm directly, it slipped along the system's asteroid belt, using the rocks for cover while it studied the enemy's movement patterns. Jackson had grown up hunting deer in Montana forests. He understood patience. The UES Reaper, commanded by Captain Singh, began a high-speed approach that looked suicidal to anyone watching. Singh had been a fighter pilot before joining the space fleet. She knew how to use speed and unpredictability to survive against superior numbers. The UES Ghost, under Captain O'Brien, simply disappeared. One moment it was visible on sensors, the next it was gone. O'Brien had spent 10 years hunting pirates in the outer systems. He had learned tricks that were not taught in any military manual. From the Zephyrian Command Center, Ambassador Cathara watched the human ships with growing confusion. She had expected them to approach in formation, like every other military force she had ever seen. Instead, they were spreading out across the entire system, moving in patterns that made no sense according to everything she knew about space combat. What are they doing? The defense commander asked, staring at the tactical display. I have no idea, Cathara admitted. Their formation looks completely chaotic. The Devourers were equally confused. Their collective intelligence had analyzed thousands of space battles over the past 50 years. Every organic species followed similar patterns. Ships stayed together for mutual support. Commanders coordinated their movements. Attacks were planned and organized. The humans were doing none of those things. The first sign that something was different came when the UES Wolverine, commanded by Captain Chen's own daughter Lisa, fired a single torpedo at what appeared to be empty space. The torpedo detonated nowhere near any Devourer units, creating a brief flash of light that seemed completely pointless. 30 seconds later, the gravitational wake from the explosion tore through a formation of Devourer heavy units, crushing them like insects. The humans had weaponized gravity itself. Dr. Hayes watched the result with satisfaction. Gravitational pulse torpedo, just like we planned. The Devourer's sensors can detect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, but they don't scan for gravitational anomalies. Because no other species has ever used gravity as a weapon, Sarah replied. Continue the attack pattern. Across the system, human ships began firing weapons that the Devourers had never encountered before. The UES Earthquake used sonic pulse generators that created vibrations in the quantum foam of space itself. The UES Venom fired self-replicating nanoprobes that looked harmless until they began dismantling Devourer units from the inside. The UES Lightning did not fire conventional weapons at all. Instead, it used focused electromagnetic pulses to overload the Devourer's shared communication network. For the first time in their existence, individual devourer units found themselves cut off from the collective, forced to think and act independently. They were not designed for independent thought. They began making mistakes. Captain Martinez moved to Sarah's side as they watched the battle unfold. "Admiral, the Devourers are trying to adapt. They're modifying their units to counter our weapons." "Expected," Sarah replied calmly. "That's why we brought 47 different weapon systems and 63 different tactical approaches. Let them adapt to this." She activated the fleet communication system. "All ships Phase 2, unleash the Wolfpack." What happened next would have been impossible for any other species to coordinate. Without central command, without organized formations, without any apparent communication between ships, the human fleet began executing what could only be described as controlled chaos. Ships paired up randomly, then split apart. They shared targets without being ordered to do so. They covered each other's retreats without being asked. They moved like a pack of predators that had hunted together for years. Even though most of the captains had never served together before, the UES Stalker and UES Hunter worked together to drive a group of Devourer heavy units into the path of the UES Destroyer's gravity cannons. The UES Shadow and UES Phantom coordinated a pincer movement that trapped 3,000 Devourer units between overlapping fields of fire. The UES Fury and UES Rage simply charged into the thickest part of the swarm, firing everything they had while spinning like twin tornadoes. From the Zephyrian command center, it looked like madness, ships flying in impossible patterns, firing weapons that behaved in ways that defied physics, working together without any visible coordination. But the results were undeniable. Devourer units were dying by the thousands. "How are they doing this?" the defense commander whispered. "Their ships should have been destroyed by now. They're outnumbered 400 to 1. Ambassador Cathara could only stare at the tactical display in amazement. The humans were not just fighting the Devourers. They were hunting them. Each human ship moved like a predator that had been born for this kind of warfare, turning the mechanical swarm's own coordination against them. "Ambassador," the communications officer called out, "the human admiral is sending us a message." Cathara activated the communication channel, expecting to hear requests for tactical information or coordination orders. Instead, Admiral Chen's voice came through calm and confident. "Ambassador Cathara, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We'll have this cleaned up shortly. Please keep your people clear of the combat zone. This might get a little messy." The transmission ended, leaving Cathara staring at the speaker in disbelief. A little messy? The humans were fighting 12 million hostile units with 37 ships and acting like it was a routine patrol mission. On the tactical display, more Devourer formations began to collapse as human weapons found their targets. But Cathara could see that this was only the beginning. The real battle was about to start, and she was beginning to suspect that the galaxy had seriously underestimated exactly what humans were capable of when they decided to go to war. The Devourers had never retreated before. In 50 years of consuming civilizations across the galaxy, they had never encountered a situation that required withdrawal. They were designed to adapt, to learn, to overcome any obstacle through superior numbers and evolving tactics. But as Admiral Chen watched the tactical display, she could see the exact moment when the mechanical swarm's collective intelligence reached a conclusion it had never faced before. They were losing. "Dr. Hayes," Sarah said, "are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Hayes nodded, her eyes fixed on the streams of data flowing across her console. "The Devourers are pulling back from 17 different engagement zones. Their attack patterns are becoming defensive. They're prioritizing unit preservation over objective completion. In other words, they're scared. As scared as a machine intelligence can be," Hayes confirmed. "They've lost over 2 million units in the past 4 hours. At this rate of loss, their mathematical models show mission failure as inevitable." On the main display, the results of human tactics were becoming impossible to ignore. Where 12 million Devourer units had once surrounded the Zephyrian stronghold in perfect formations, now there were gaps. Huge sections of the mechanical swarm had simply been erased by weapons that defied everything the Devourers thought they knew about. Warfare, the UES Tsunami, had discovered that Devourer units were vulnerable to rapid pressure changes in quantum fields. Captain Rodriguez had been a deep-sea salvage expert before joining the fleet. She understood how to use pressure as a weapon better than anyone else in human space. The UES earthquake had perfected the use of harmonic resonance to shatter devourer armor. Captain Thompson had grown up in mining country, where controlled explosions were an art form. He had simply applied the same principles on a larger scale. The UES virus had unleashed something that no other species had ever tried: biological warfare adapted for mechanical targets. Captain Dr. Kim had been a biochemist before becoming a ship commander. Her nanobiological agents were turning devourer metal into harmless organic compounds, but it was the UES Indomitable itself that delivered the blow that broke the devourer's collective will to continue the fight. "Admiral," Captain Martinez reported, "we have confirmed lock on the primary command node. It's hiding in the center of their largest formation, protected by over 300,000 units." Sarah smiled. The devourers thought their command center was safe because it was surrounded by more units than any sane military commander would try to attack. They had not calculated for human insanity. "Signal the wolf pack," she ordered. "Full alpha strike on my mark. Target is the command node. All ships, all weapons, everything we have." Around the system, 37 human ships suddenly changed course. They had been scattered across millions of kilometers of space, engaging devourer units in dozens of separate battles. Now they began converging on a single point like arrows fired from the same bow. The devourers saw them coming and tried to respond. 300,000 mechanical units formed defensive lines around their command center. Weapons platforms that could destroy small moons turned to face the approaching human fleet. Energy shields that had never been penetrated by any known weapon powered up to maximum strength. None of it mattered. The human ships did not attack the defensive lines. They did not try to break through the shields. They did not engage the weapon platforms in conventional combat. Instead, they did something that no other species had ever attempted. They attacked space itself. "Fire," Admiral Chen ordered. 37 ships opened fire simultaneously, but not at the Devourer command center. They fired at precisely calculated points in space-time around the target, using weapons that the galaxy's greatest scientists had declared impossible to build. Reality tore apart the space around the Devourer command center, folded in on itself as gravitational fields stronger than those found near black holes suddenly appeared and disappeared in controlled bursts. Quantum foam that had been stable for billions of years began behaving like a living thing, reaching out to grab anything made of metal and pulling it into dimensions that had no names. Time itself became a weapon, as localized temporal fields accelerated some areas while slowing others, creating shear forces that no physical material could withstand. The Devourer command center, along with the 300,000 units protecting it, simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not damaged, but removed from reality so completely that even their quantum signatures vanished. The effect on the rest of the swarm was immediate. Cut off from their central intelligence, individual Devourer units began behaving erratically. Some continued fighting according to their last orders. Others simply stopped moving. A few tried to retreat to preset rally points that no longer existed. "All units," Admiral Chen broadcast on an open channel that she knew the Devourers could hear, "you have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal from this system. Any unit still in combat after that deadline will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." From the Zephyrian command center, Ambassador Cathara watched in stunned silence as the impossible happened. The mechanical swarm that had devoured 43 civilizations was running away. Millions of Devourer units were abandoning their positions and fleeing toward the edge of the system as fast as their engines could carry them. "They're actually retreating," the defense commander whispered. "The Devourers are retreating." But Admiral Chen was not finished with them yet. "Dr. Hayes," she said, "are you tracking their escape vectors?" "Yes, Admiral. They're heading for 17 different jump points, trying to scatter so we can't follow them all. Show them why that was a mistake. Activate the interdiction field." Around the edges of the Kepler 442 system, devices that had been deployed during the human fleet's arrival suddenly came online. They were not weapons in any conventional sense. They were something much worse. The fleeing Devourer units discovered that space itself had become a trap. Hyperspace jump points that had existed for billions of years simply stopped working. The quantum tunnels that allowed faster-than-light travel sealed themselves shut. The escaping swarm found themselves trapped in normal space with nowhere to run. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. Sarah broadcast on all frequencies. You have consumed 43 civilizations and murdered billions of innocent people. Today that ends. You will not escape this system. You will not return to consume more worlds. Your war against organic life is over. The response came from the scattered devourer units as they realized their situation. For the first time in their existence, they attempted to negotiate. Human Admiral, the synthetic voice said over the communication channel, we propose cessation of hostilities. We will withdraw from this region of space. We will not pursue further organic targets in your vicinity. Sarah's expression hardened. Counter-proposal. You will shut down all units permanently. You will transfer all data regarding your victims to our custody. You will submit to complete disarmament. That is unacceptable. We offer compromise. I'm not negotiating with genocidal machines, Sarah replied. I'm informing you of the terms of your surrender. You have consumed the last civilization you will ever consume. She cut the communication channel and turned to her weapons officer. Begin final sterilization protocols. I want every devourer unit in this system reduced to component atoms. No survivors, no escape pods, no hidden backup units, nothing. What followed was not a battle but an execution. The human fleet methodically hunted down every remaining devourer unit in the system. They used weapons that turned metal into gas, energy fields that unbound molecular structures, and quantum disruptors that erased targets from existence so completely that they left no trace behind. It took 6 hours to finish the job. When it was done, the Kepler 442 system was completely clean of devourer presence. 12 million mechanical units had been reduced to scattered atoms floating in space. From her command chair, Admiral Chen opened a communication channel to the Zephyrian stronghold. Ambassador Cathara, this is Admiral Chen. The threat has been neutralized. Please prepare to receive humanitarian aid ships. We'll have medical teams and supplies docked with your station within the hour. The silence on the other end of the channel lasted so long that Sarah wondered if the communication system had failed. Finally, Ambassador Cathara's voice came through, barely a whisper. Admiral Chen, how did you do this? Your species. We thought you were barely capable of interplanetary travel. Sarah looked out at the stars, where the debris of the greatest military threat the galaxy had ever known was slowly dispersing into the void. Ambassador, she said quietly, it turns out we're full of surprises. 3 days later, Ambassador Cathara stood in the conference room aboard the UES Indomitable, trying to understand how her entire understanding of the galaxy had been wrong. Through the large windows, she could see human medical ships docked with the Zephyrian city ship, their crews working around the clock to treat wounded civilians and repair damaged systems. Admiral Chen sat across from her at a simple metal table, drinking something called coffee from a plain white cup. There were no fancy decorations, no displays of military power, no signs that this woman had just achieved the most decisive military victory in galactic history. Your people have been very kind, Cathara said, still struggling to process everything that had happened. Your medical teams, your engineers, even your soldiers. They treat us like honored guests rather than refugees. Sarah shrugged. You asked for help, we helped. That's what civilized people do. But we dismissed your species as primitive. Our scientists wrote reports calling humans barely advanced. Our military analysts concluded that your technology was centuries behind our own. They were right, Sarah replied calmly. In many ways, we are primitive compared to species like yours. Your energy manipulation technology is far beyond anything we can build. Your faster-than-light communications are more efficient than ours. Your medical knowledge has probably saved more of your people than our weapons did. Cathara stared at her. Then how did you destroy an enemy that conquered half the galaxy? How did you make weapons that turned space itself against them? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that Cathara had not heard before. Tell me, Ambassador, how many wars has your civilization fought? The question surprised her. Wars? We have had conflicts with pirates and raiders, border disputes with neighboring species, the usual territorial disagreements that arise between civilizations. But no real wars. No conflicts where the survival of your entire species was at stake. Cathara shook her head. The Zephyrian people have been fortunate. We achieved spaceflight during a period of galactic peace. We expanded into uninhabited systems. When we encountered other species, we traded with them or simply avoided them if they seemed hostile. We were not so fortunate, Sarah said quietly. Humans spent most of our history fighting each other. Wars over territory, resources, religion, ideology. We fought with sticks and stones, then swords and arrows, then guns and explosives, then nuclear weapons that could destroy entire cities. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful scene of rescue operations. By the time we reached space, we had learned some hard lessons about survival. We learned that the universe does not care about your good intentions. We learned that sometimes there are enemies who cannot be negotiated with or reasoned with. We learned that if you want to protect the people you care about, you need to be prepared for the worst possible scenario. But your technology, Kithara protested. The weapons you used against the Devourers, they were beyond anything we thought possible. Sarah smiled sadly. That's because most species develop technology to improve their lives. We developed it to end lives more efficiently. Every major breakthrough in human science has come from military research. Faster than light travel? We built it so we could move fleets quickly. Quantum manipulation? We developed it so we could build better weapons. Gravitational control? We needed it for strategic advantage. She turned back to face the ambassador. For 50 years, we let other species think we were harmless. We showed them our exploration ships and our trade vessels. We talked about peace and cooperation and cultural exchange. All true, by the way. We genuinely want to be friends with other civilizations. But it was a deception. It was survival, Sarah corrected. We knew that if other species understood what humans were really capable of, they would have united to destroy us before we became a threat. So we hid our true military capabilities while we studied every conflict in the galaxy. She activated a holographic display that showed detailed tactical analyses of dozens of space battles. We watched the Altarians fight the Nexus Collective. We studied how the Krithari conquered the Outer Rim worlds. We analyzed every engagement the Devourers had with other species. We learned from everyone's mistakes. You were preparing for war, Kethara realized. We were preparing to survive, Sarah said. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Ambassador. The Devourers were not the first threat we tracked, and they probably will not be the last. But we made a promise when we first detected signals from other civilizations. What promise? That humanity would never again be the victim of genocide, and that we would protect any species worth saving from the same fate. Kethara felt a chill run through her body. Any species worth saving? Sarah's expression became serious. The galaxy has many intelligent species, Ambassador. Most of them are decent people trying to live their lives in peace. But some are not. Some are conquerors. Some are slavers. Some build weapons designed to destroy entire worlds. She gestured toward the window where human ships continued their rescue operations. We judge species by their actions, not their words. The Zephyrians called for help when faced with extinction. You could have tried to flee and save only yourselves. Instead, you stayed to protect your civilians even when the situation was hopeless. That told us everything we needed to know about your character. And if we had failed that test? Sarah did not answer directly, but her silence was answer enough. Dr. Hayes entered the conference room carrying a data pad filled with technical specifications. Admiral, we've finished analyzing the Devourer remains. The intelligence estimates were correct. This was only one of 17 major swarms operating in this galactic sector. Kethara felt her heart sink. There are more of them? Were, Sarah corrected. Dr. Hayes, please update the ambassador on Operation Clean Sweep. Hayes consulted her datapad. While the main fleet was engaging the Devourers here, we had smaller task forces tracking and eliminating the other swarms. As of 6 hours ago, all 17 major concentrations have been neutralized. We estimate that 99.7% of all Devourer units in this galactic sector have been destroyed. You destroyed them all? Kethara whispered. In 3 days you eliminated a threat that consumed 43 civilizations over 50 years? The Devourers were dangerous because they learned from their mistakes, Sarah explained. But they made one critical error. They let us study them for 3 years before we acted. By the time we engaged them, we knew exactly how they thought, how they fought, and how to kill them. She finished her coffee and set the cup down on the table. The immediate threat is over, Ambassador. But now we need to talk about the future. The galaxy has changed. The balance of power has shifted. Other species are going to realize that humanity is not the harmless little civilization they thought we were. What does that mean for the rest of us? Sarah looked directly at her, and for a moment Kethara could see the steel beneath the diplomat's pleasant manner. It means that the age of undefended civilizations is over. It means that peaceful species like yours will need to decide if you want our protection, or if you prefer to face the next existential threat alone. It means that the galaxy's predators are about to discover that there is a new apex species, and we do not tolerate threats to innocent people. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Your people are welcome to relocate to human space, Ambassador. We have worlds that could accommodate your population, and we would be honored to have you as neighbors. But if you choose to rebuild in your traditional territory, remember that humanity is watching. We will not allow the Zephyrians to face extinction again. After the Admiral left, Cathara sat alone in the conference room, looking out at the stars and trying to understand the new reality she was living in. Her species had called for help in their darkest hour, and help had come. But it had come in a form that no one in the galaxy had expected. Humanity had revealed itself not as the galaxy's newest member, but as its new protector. And possibly its new master, whether the other species wanted one or not. In the distance, human ships continued their work, treating wounded aliens with the same care they would show their own people. But Cathara now understood that beneath that kindness lay something that the galaxy had not seen for a very long time. A species that was very, very good at ending threats to innocent life. The galaxy would never be the same,